The murder of Barbara McNeely, a true crime story. It was just after dusk on September 7, 1977, in Joplin, Missouri, a Wednesday evening like any other. The Northpark Mall, still relatively new to the city, buzzed with late shoppers, the lot bathed in the flickering neon of anchor stores and parking lights. Among them was 20-year-old Barbara McNeely, a bright, well-loved young woman from Granby, Missouri, who had just returned to the J.C. Penney store where she worked. She'd spent the afternoon in Pittsburgh, Kansas, covering a shift at another branch and had returned shortly after 7:30 p.m., as confirmed by her coworkers. By 8:30 p.m., she would be fatally stabbed in the parking lot, a crime so brutal and public that it would shake the community to its core. Barbara's murder is one of the most jarring and heart-wrenching chapters in Joplin's history. She wasn't a controversial figure or someone living on the fringe of society. She was a hometown girl, a former homecoming queen, a Sunday school teacher, and a junior at Missouri Southern State College. She represented everything wholesome and full of promise. Her life was stolen in an act of senseless, vicious violence that stunned her family, her friends, and the greater community. The killer would be identified within days, but the resolution, at least in the legal sense, would raise as many questions as it answered. Barbara McNeely was born on June 30, 1957, in the town of Granby in Newton County, Missouri. She was the daughter of Billy Ray Bill McNeely and Lona Lee Brownie Hawkins McNeely. Her roots in Granby ran deep. The McNeely family was well known and active in the small community, attending the Granby United Methodist Church, where Barbara herself taught Sunday school to fourth-grade students. She lived at home with her parents and siblings, Brad and Becky, and was described by those who knew her as gentle, sincere, and vibrant. In high school, she was more than just a friendly face. She stood out as a leader. Barbara graduated from East Newton High School in 1975 and was named Homecoming Queen in 1974. She participated in school activities, took her education seriously, and formed strong bonds with classmates who would later speak of her warmth and kindness with tears in their eyes. After high school, she enrolled at Missouri Southern State College in Joplin, pursuing her degree while balancing part-time work. Her job at J.C. Penney in the newly opened Northpark Mall wasn't just a paycheck, it was a foothold into independence. She had recently begun working extra hours, sometimes at the Pittsburgh, Kansas store as well. September 7th was one of those days. She worked until 4:30 p.m. at the Joplin store, drove to Pittsburgh to assist for a few hours, and returned that evening. By all accounts, she was eager to succeed, driven by ambition and compassion. When Barbara pulled into the east parking lot of the Northpark Mall, she likely thought of little more than finishing her shift or running an errand. Her car, a red and white vehicle, was parked just north of the J.C. Penney entrance. What happened next was a blur of horror. At approximately 8:30 p.m., Barbara stumbled, bloodied and frantic, into Kinney's shoe store inside the mall. Witnesses said she was pleading for help, her clothes soaked with blood, before she collapsed. Paramedics were summoned, and she was rushed to St. John's Medical Center by Joplin Police Ambulance. Despite their efforts, she was pronounced dead at 10:30 p.m. The autopsy, conducted by Jasper County Coroner Dr. Wendell Fuhr, confirmed the violence Barbara endured. She had been stabbed 21 times, wounds concentrated on her chest, back, and neck. Dr. Fuhr noted that the most likely fatal wound was a deep stab to her neck. Despite the number of injuries, there was no evidence of sexual assault. Still, the brutality of the attack led authorities to initially suspect a sadistic motive. Police Lieutenant Charles Brewer revealed that the attack had likely occurred inside Barbara's vehicle. A pocket knife, believed to be the murder weapon, was discovered on the pavement just a few feet from her car. Her purse was still inside the vehicle, though police could not confirm whether anything had been taken. The circumstances made clear this was not a robbery gone wrong. As the Joplin Police Department began piecing together the timeline, they issued a public appeal. Anyone in the mall parking lot between 8 o'clock and 8:30 p.m. was urged to come forward. The police also announced that they were looking for the occupants of a late-model van, described as being painted blue, green, and white. Witnesses reported that the vehicle had sped away from the area shortly after the attack. Inside the van were reportedly two white males, one in a yellow football jersey and yellow shorts, the other in a long-sleeved shirt and black slacks. Despite these leads, the case was moving slowly. The breakthrough came not from forensic evidence but from a confession of sorts. William Robert McMurray II, a 19-year-old student at Ozark Bible College in Joplin, walked into the police station on September 9th and claimed to have witnessed the stabbing. According to investigators, McMurray first said he had seen two men attack a woman in the mall parking lot. However, his story quickly unraveled. He had confided in his 16-year-old girlfriend in Indiana, saying he had witnessed the murder. That girl, concerned, told her mother. The mother then alerted authorities in Indiana, who relayed the tip to Joplin police. When detectives questioned McMurray further, he confessed he hadn't seen the murder. He had committed it. He explained that he had approached Barbara in the parking lot, seen her inside her vehicle, and, without warning, stabbed her repeatedly. The confession was corroborated by physical evidence. McMurray's bloody fingerprints were on Barbara's car. Strands of her hair were found among his belongings, and her blood was discovered on his wristwatch. He also led police to the location where he had discarded the murder weapon, a folding pocket knife hidden in bushes near the mall. The weapon matched Barbara's wounds. When questioned about motive, McMurray gave a chilling explanation. Barbara reminded him of his mother. McMurray was charged with capital murder and held on $200,000 bond at the Jasper County Jail. He appeared calm and detached at arraignment, dressed in a sport coat and shirt, avoiding eye contact with the crowd and press. The trial opened in January 1978 at the Jasper County Circuit Court, Division No. 2, under Judge Ben Pyle. Due to McMurray's confession and the overwhelming forensic evidence, the prosecution presented its case in just 34 minutes, calling only 2 witnesses. The facts were stipulated by both sides. McMurray had stabbed Barbara McNeely to death in her car in the mall parking lot, but the defense was not seeking to deny the act. They sought instead to prove that McMurray had no understanding of what he was doing when he committed the crime. The centerpiece of their argument was mental illness. Charles Buchanan and David Robards, McMurray's defense team, called several psychiatrists to the stand. The most prominent was Dr. Henry Bretkowski, who testified that McMurray suffered from paranoid illusions and had experienced a complete break with reality. According to Dr. Bretkowski, McMurray underwent a dissociative episode during which he experienced derealization and began to confuse Barbara McNeely with his abusive mother. In that moment, he believed he was defending himself from a tormentor. A second psychiatrist, Dr. Sadashiv Parwatikar, testified that McMurray's detachment from reality was not caused by brain damage or organic disease, but rather from extreme emotional trauma, abandonment, and childhood abuse. These stressors, the defense argued, led him to develop a dangerously distorted perception of reality. McMurray had grown up in a fractured home, moving between his father's house in California and various institutions in Indiana. He had lived at the Indiana Christian Children's Home after being placed there due to family conflict and theft. By the time he arrived in Joplin to attend Ozark Bible College in late summer 1977, he had already attempted to escape his past by starting fresh. But the internal storm had not passed. Throughout the trial, McMurray was mostly silent. Observers noted that he often stared at the floor, seemingly numb or lost in thought. His attorney stated that he was unable to express remorse because he could not fully comprehend what he had done. The jury, comprised of 8 women and 4 men, deliberated for 16 hours over 2 days. Their final verdict: William McMurray was not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect. Judge Pyle immediately ordered that McMurray be committed to a state mental hospital for custody, care, and treatment. The verdict sent shockwaves through Joplin. Many were appalled that a confessed killer could be found not guilty, no matter the legal reasoning. Letters to the editor, conversations in diners, and Sunday sermons all grappled with the meaning of justice. While some understood the jury's obligation to follow the law, others believed McMurray had escaped accountability. Barbara's family, meanwhile, tried to cope with the unimaginable. They buried their daughter at Granby Memorial Cemetery and returned to a quiet, grief-stricken life. Years passed, and though McMurray remained out of the headlines, the pain lingered. In the years that followed, a scholarship fund was created in Barbara's name at East Newton High School. It became a way for her community to remember her not as a victim, but as a person, a young woman with promise, kindness, and potential. But the story was far from over. The courtroom had emptied. The verdict had been read. The killer had been committed to a state institution, not a prison. And Barbara McNeely, 20 years old, bright-eyed and deeply loved, was gone. In a city like Joplin, where people wave at each other in grocery store parking lots and church directories fill more pages than the phone book, the murder of a hometown girl reverberated far beyond headlines. It struck a communal nerve. Barbara had been a fixture in the small town of Granby, her death a tear in the fabric of an entire region. But what followed, the trial, the verdict, and most of all, what happened after, would prolong the pain and ensure her name was never forgotten. Following the jury's January 1978 decision, William Robert McMurray II was sent to a state mental hospital in Fulton, Missouri. He was evaluated by psychiatrists, treated, medicated, and monitored. No longer under the threat of prison, but not free either. The public, understandably, lost sight of him. News coverage faded. The community, still reeling, tried to go on. But inside the McNeely household, the weight of that verdict never lifted. Barbara's parents, Bill and Brownie, were devastated. Her brother Brad and sister Becky, both still living at home in 1977, quietly bore the loss. There was no sense of closure, and no announcement came when, just a few years later, the man who killed their daughter was quietly released. In or around 1984, 7 years after the murder, William McMurray walked free. No public notice was issued. The McNeely family did not receive a letter. There was no press conference or statement from the Department of Mental Health. He had served less than a decade, not in a prison cell but in a hospital ward, and was now a free man. He reportedly married, had children, lived a quiet life. It's not known whether he remained in Missouri or moved elsewhere, but what is certain is that for the McNeely family, the silence surrounding his release was another violent blow. They had endured the legal process, the verdict, the headlines, and now they were left with the hollow knowledge that the man who ended Barbara's life was living his. Not behind bars, not under supervision, free. This revelation didn't resurface publicly until years later, when bloggers and community members began re-examining old cases, especially those that had never sat right with the people who lived through them. In November 2003, a Find a Grave memorial for Barbara McNeely was created. The page included photos of Barbara as a smiling teenager, news clippings from her murder, and touching tributes from strangers and loved ones alike. Visitors left virtual flowers, messages, and comments that continued for decades. One contributor uploaded a photo of Barbara in her homecoming queen sash from East Newton High School. Another uploaded clippings from the Joplin Globe and the Carthage Press, showing the young woman's obituary and funeral notice. As time passed, the memorial became not just a site of remembrance, but a rallying point for those who still grieved, who still wondered how a life so full could be taken so suddenly, so brutally, and so unresolved. Then, in 2010, Barbara's name returned to local conversation when longtime area educator and blogger Randy Turner published a deeply personal post revisiting the case. Turner's blog post was more than a historical analysis. It was a cry of outrage. In the post, he described Barbara as the kind of girl everyone liked. Polite, hard-working, decent. He detailed the trial, the insanity plea, and what he saw as a profound failure of justice. He also shared a chilling new revelation. McMurray, it seemed, had re-emerged, writing a book. The man who had once stabbed Barbara 21 times was now reportedly working on a memoir about his life, his troubled childhood, and the crime that had defined it. Included in the blog post was an excerpt from a message allegedly sent by McMurray himself, expressing remorse and asking for understanding. Turner, furious, was not interested in redemption. He criticized the idea that the man who killed Barbara McNeely should have the platform to explain himself, let alone profit from it. His post was widely shared in Joplin and surrounding communities. For many, it reopened old wounds. For some younger readers, it was their first exposure to the case. Barbara's story, frozen for so long in yellowed newsprint, was alive again. Social media had become the new street corner, the new kitchen table. And in Facebook groups, local forums, and Reddit threads, people began to talk. One Reddit user, posting under the name Throwaway786767X, shared what they described as a second-hand account of the murder. The user claimed that their then-girlfriend's mother had been Barbara's boss at JCPenney, and that Barbara had been running an errand for her when the attack occurred. They alleged McMurray had been hiding in Barbara's vehicle, and that after she was stabbed, she still managed to make it into the mall before collapsing. Though not verifiable by official records, the account matched details in police reports and survivor interviews, adding vivid texture to the facts already known. If true, it meant that Barbara had fought to survive even after sustaining horrific injuries, a final act of courage in a night of horror. These posts, shared decades after her death, showed just how deep Barbara's story had etched itself into the cultural memory of Joplin. Her murder hadn't faded. It had lingered, retold in whispers, remembered in outrage, and mourned in silence. In the immediate aftermath of Barbara's death, and again after her father's passing in 2009, memorial contributions were directed to the Barbara McNeely Scholarship Fund, managed through Clark Funeral Home in Granby and Neosho. The scholarship was designed for East Newton High School students, specifically those who embodied the qualities Barbara was known for: kindness, work ethic, leadership. It wasn't a large fund with national visibility, but it didn't need to be. It was local, meaningful, and personal, just like Barbara had been. Each time a scholarship recipient walked across the graduation stage, her name was spoken aloud. In that way, her legacy lived on, not just in stone or memory, but in future promise. Barbara's parents never truly recovered from her loss. In 2009, her father, Bill McNeely, died. His obituary mentioned Barbara simply and heartbreakingly, preceded in death by a daughter, Barbara Ann McNeely, September 7, 1977. Her mother, Lona Brownie McNeely, passed away in April 2025. Both parents were buried near Barbara in Granby Memorial Cemetery. Those graves tell a story that no verdict can change: a family fractured, a daughter lost. For her siblings Brad and Becky, and for the many friends and classmates who remembered Barbara not just as a murder victim but as a friend, the passage of time did not dull the sharpness of her absence. As one blogger wrote, "One of the most horrible days of my life was the day I realized I no longer remembered what her voice sounded like." Even decades later, those who knew Barbara struggled to talk about her without emotion. The pain was still raw, the injustice still bitter. One Strother, William McMurray was never retried. No parole board ever reviewed his release. There were no press conferences, no apologies, and, despite a message posted online, no formal restitution. His time in the hospital system was not tracked publicly, and no law required the McNeely family to be notified of his release. To some, the trial had followed the law. McMurray was diagnosed with a severe mental illness, evaluated by state experts, and institutionalized. The jury had acted within Missouri's legal framework. The outcome, by statute, was correct. But to Barbara's family, and to many in the public, that verdict felt hollow. Not guilty did not match the reality of what happened in the Northpark Mall parking lot on that September night. The justice system, so often rigid and procedural, sometimes fails to speak to deeper truths: that Barbara had no second chance, that a 20-year-old woman was taken before her life had even truly begun, that a family buried their daughter and never saw the man who confessed to killing her face punishment in the traditional sense. Today, the name Barbara McNeely is not widely known outside Southwest Missouri, but it should be. Her murder is one of the defining tragedies of Joplin's post-war era, not only for its brutality, but for the legal and emotional legacy it left behind. It raised questions about the insanity defense, victim notification, and the balance between psychiatric care and justice. But more than that, it revealed the strength of a community determined to remember. The scholarship, the gravestone, the digital tributes, the blog posts. The flowers left in her name each year, long after her classmates had grown old. Barbara Ann McNeely's life was brief, but it was luminous. Her death was unspeakably cruel. And the wound it left in Joplin has never fully healed. But she is not forgotten. Mylak with Hafen. She lives in the students who receive her scholarship, in the memories of friends who still speak her name, in the town of Granby, where she taught Sunday school, and in the public record of a city that once asked, "How could this happen here?" Her story, now fully told, remains part of Joplin's history, not just as a crime, but as a testament to the fragility of life, to the persistence of grief, and to the enduring power of memory.